My name is Regina M. Piercy, and I am 34 years old. I still don't understand why my kids' efforts were insulted like that, and I think that's the part that keeps looping in my head when the house is quiet and everyone else has moved on. They spent the entire week getting ready for Easter brunch at my parents' place, not because anyone told them they had to, but because they wanted to. They wanted to show up with something sweet and handmade, the kind of gift that says, "We thought about you, we tried, we love you." My boyfriend stood at the counter with them after dinner each night, sleeves rolled up, smiling while they painted pastel eggs and rolled sugar cookie dough like it was a serious operation. They debated which colors looked most like spring. They argued over whether the bunny on the card should be smiling or serious. They tucked in drawings from school, one of all of us under a rainbow, another with a giant bunny so cheerful it looked like it was laughing. By the time Easter morning came, the basket looked like something you'd see on a magazine cover, neat and pastel and careful, like love arranged into a perfect little display. The kids carried it into my parents' house with both hands, practically vibrating with excitement. The dining table was set for 10. The air smelled like baked ham and cinnamon rolls. My dad was in the corner with his newspaper, not looking up. A couple of cousins were already there talking loudly, the kind of loud that fills space so no one has to address anything uncomfortable. My sister Jenna sat on the couch with her little girl, scrolling like she was trying not to be present. The kids ran straight to my mom with the basket, eager to hand it over like they were delivering a surprise they'd been keeping secret for days. My boyfriend stood beside me, quiet, watching my mother's face, the way you watch weather when you're trying to predict a storm. My mom glanced down at the basket, her eyes moving over the eggs, the cookies, the drawings, the little details my kids had obsessed over. Then, without missing a beat, she said, "Don't make this a pity show." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words cut through the room cleanly, like a knife you don't unhear until you feel it. My boyfriend's posture changed instantly, shoulders tightening like he was about to speak, but he didn't. My kids froze. Their faces went blank in that way children's faces do when something doesn't compute, when kindness meets cruelty, and they don't yet know which rule of the world applies. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, not because no one heard her, but because everyone did. My cousins stared down at their plates like the patterns suddenly became fascinating. My sister didn't look up from her phone. My dad turned a page in his newspaper as if that was a normal response to watching his grandkids get crushed in real time. My mother turned away toward the stove, already busying herself, moving on like she hadn't just ripped something delicate right out of the air. I felt the moment split inside me. A flash of rage, sharp enough to make my vision narrow, and then the immediate instinct to swallow it because my kids were standing right there. They were watching me. They were learning what I would tolerate. They were learning what love costs in this family. So I did the only thing I could do without making it worse for them in front of that table. I took the basket gently from their hands, set it on the table like it was fragile, and smiled. Not because I thought anything was funny, because a tight, deliberate smile is sometimes the only thing that keeps words from turning into damage you can't undo. My boyfriend looked at me, eyes asking if we were leaving. I nodded once toward the door. We gathered the kids. We didn't announce anything. We didn't argue. We didn't give my mother a scene to use later like a trophy. We just walked out. We didn't even sit down. We didn't eat a bite. The drive home was quiet except for the questions from the back seat. They asked what pity show meant. They asked why Grandma sounded mad. My boyfriend kept his voice calm and told them sometimes grown-ups say things that don't make sense, and it isn't their fault. I kept my eyes on the road because I was still deciding what kind of consequence a moment like that deserved. Because I knew my mother. I knew the pattern. She could say something cruel, watch everyone swallow it, and then 3 days later demand loyalty like nothing happened. And I knew something else too, something that made my stomach sink even as I kept driving. This wasn't going to end at Easter brunch. 3 days later, the proof showed up in my phone like it always did. Not as an apology, not as a check-in about the kids, not even as a, "Hey, are you okay?" after we walked out of Easter brunch like smoke. It was a text from Jenna. "Why did you lock the account? We can't pay." That was it. No context, no softness, no acknowledgement of what happened at the table, just panic, sharpened into entitlement by habit. For months, I had been quietly helping her. After her divorce, she'd been struggling, and I understood that struggle in a way most people pretend they do, but don't. Rent doesn't care that you're tired. Daycare doesn't care that your heart is broken. Bills don't care that your life blew up. My parents talked a big game about family sticking together, but it was me sending money every few weeks so Jenna wouldn't fall behind, so her daughter wouldn't get uprooted, so she could breathe. I didn't announce it. I didn't post about it. I didn't make it a show. I just did it. What Jenna didn't seem to understand was that the account I'd been transferring the money into was in my name. It had started that way for convenience, because she was overwhelmed and I was trying to make it easy. But over time, it became something else, a quiet pipeline, a system, a way for everyone to assume the support would always be there without anyone having to ask how I was managing it. My mom loved that arrangement because it let her feel like the family was being taken care of without her actually doing anything. After Easter, I shut it down. So when Jenna asked why I locked it, I stared at the message for a long second, feeling that same cold clarity I'd felt when my mom insulted my kids and then turned away like the damage didn't matter. I typed back one line. Thought you didn't want a show. No answer came after that. Just silence that felt like a door closing slowly. That evening, there was pounding on my front door. Not a polite knock, not a neighbor. The kind of pounding that says someone is already convinced they're right and they're here to collect what they believe they're owed. I opened it, and my mom was standing there, face flushed red with rage, eyes bright in that way that always made me feel like I was 12 again and about to be scolded for something I didn't understand. She didn't wait to be invited in. She started talking immediately, rapid fire, voice layered with accusation and righteousness. She said I had no right to abandon my sister. She said Jenna was a single mom. She said it was my job to make sure Jenna had what she needed. Not, could I help? Not, are you able? Not, what happened? My job. Like I was an employee in the family business, and Jenna's survival was my assignment. My boyfriend appeared behind me in the hallway, drying his hands on a towel, expression tight. He didn't step in front of me. He didn't posture. He just stood there, present. And somehow that made my mom even angrier, like his existence was a reminder that I had a life outside her control. I let my mom finish her first tirade without interrupting. I watched her the way you watch someone who's repeating a script they've used for years, waiting for the moment they realize it no longer works. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I asked her, calmly, why she thought she could insult my children in front of an entire table, and then show up days later demanding help from the same people she had just humiliated. Her eyes narrowed immediately, like I'd broken a rule by bringing it up. She tried to wave it away, calling it a misunderstanding, saying I was too sensitive, saying kids shouldn't be coddled. Then she pivoted right back to Jenna, as if my children's feelings were a minor inconvenience compared to rent being due. She said Jenna had a little girl to raise. She said family takes care of family. She said I was punishing everyone over one comment. One comment. That's what she called it. My boyfriend finally spoke, and his voice was controlled, steady, the opposite of escalating. He said what my mom didn't want to hear, that this wasn't about one comment, that it was about a pattern of disrespect and the expectation that Regina will fix everything quietly, while everyone else gets to act however they want. He said my kids weren't props in some family power game. He said if my mom wanted access to them, she needed to treat them like human beings. My mom's face tightened at the word need, like she could feel the control slipping. She switched tactics instantly, moving from rage to guilt, from demands to a wounded voice that always made outsiders think she was the victim. She talked about everything she'd done for me growing up. She said she couldn't believe I'd turned my back on my sister. She said Jenna was struggling and I was being cruel. I told her the truth. I helped Jenna because I chose to, not because I owed anyone. I reminded her that when Jenna's ex walked out, it wasn't my parents keeping her afloat. It was me, month after month, quietly. And I wasn't going to be treated like an ATM, while my children were spoken to like they were trying to put on a pity show. That hit a nerve. I could see it in the way my mom's mouth tightened, the way her gaze flicked toward my boyfriend like she was searching for the easiest target. And then she did what she always did when she couldn't win the argument on facts. She blamed him. She accused him of changing me, of turning me against the family. She said I wasn't the woman I used to be. She implied my kids were being influenced by the wrong person, the wrong household, the wrong values, as if respect was some dangerous trend my boyfriend had introduced into our lives. That was it for me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just opened the door wider and told her she was welcome to see her grandchildren any time she could treat them and the people in this house with respect. Until then, there was nothing else to discuss. She stormed out, muttering that she didn't raise me to be like this, slamming the door hard enough that the frame rattled. After she left, the house went quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that feels like a storm gathering in the distance. My boyfriend looked at me and said softly that she wasn't going to let this go. I didn't need him to tell me that. I knew my mother, and I knew what came next when she couldn't control someone directly. She would control the story. The silence after my mom stormed out didn't last long. It never does with her. When she loses control of a situation face to face, she looks for other doors to push open. Side doors, back doors. People who aren't there to hear the full story, but are more than happy to pass along fragments of it. The first message came from my cousin Megan. It started innocently enough, the way these things always do. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay over there?" I replied, "Yes, we were fine." A few minutes later, she followed up with something that made my stomach drop. She said she'd heard Melissa was keeping the kids away from their grandmother and that things at our house had become tense since I stopped helping Jenna. She didn't accuse me directly. She didn't need to. The implication was already doing the work. I told her calmly that wasn't true, that my mom was welcome to see the kids as long as she treated them with respect. Megan didn't respond to that part. She changed the subject, which told me everything I needed to know about how much of the story she wanted. The next day, my aunt called. She's usually the kind to avoid family drama, so the fact that she was calling at all made my chest tighten. She said my mom had been worried sick about me. She said my mom kept telling people she didn't recognize me anymore, that I'd changed since being with my boyfriend. Then she added, hesitantly, that there were stories going around about Melissa being disrespectful at Easter, about her raising her voice at my mom in front of everyone. That was a lie, a clean one, and it spread faster than the truth ever does. By the third day, I could see the pattern clearly. This wasn't accidental gossip. This was a narrative being built. In my mom's version, there was no insult to my kids. There was no favoritism toward Jenna. There was no history of me quietly carrying financial weight for the family. There was just an ungrateful daughter, a struggling single mom sister, and a boyfriend who had changed me. It was neat, simple, and designed to make anyone who questioned it feel like they were attacking a wounded mother. Melissa took it hard. She'd never cared much about what extended family thought of her, but now she was being painted as manipulative and cold by people who'd never seen her do a single unkind thing. Every night that week, she sat at the kitchen table scrolling through messages. Some were fishing for details. Others were openly judgmental. A few offered prayers, in that way people do, when they've already chosen a side. She'd read them over and over until she finally set the phone down like it weighed too much to hold. Then my mom took it online. She started posting vague, carefully worded Facebook statuses. Things like, "It's heartbreaking when you lose a child to someone else's influence," or, "Family should never turn their back on family, no matter what." The comment sections filled with relatives offering sympathy, speculating, and occasionally dropping passive-aggressive hints that they knew exactly who she was talking about. No names, no specifics, just enough to let people fill in the blanks the way she wanted. What bothered me most wasn't the hit to my own reputation. It was the realization that if I stayed quiet, this version of events would harden into fact, and one day my kids would hear it. They'd hear that their mother was controlling, that their father had abandoned his sister out of pride, that their grandmother had been wronged. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I decided to stop letting the story travel without me. The next Sunday, I called my mom and told her we were coming over. Her voice flattened immediately, tight with that false calm she uses when she thinks she's winning. She said fine, but if we were coming to attack her again, there was no point. I told her this wasn't a phone conversation anymore. This was happening in person. I chose Sunday afternoon deliberately. My parents always had people over after lunch. Aunts, uncles, sometimes neighbors. I wanted witnesses. Not to shame her, but to end the whisper campaign by replacing it with something much harder to twist. Melissa walked in beside me, chin lifted, not in arrogance, but in resolve. The living room was exactly as I expected. My mom on the couch with Jenna beside her, my dad in his recliner, pretending to watch a game he wasn't really paying attention to. 2 aunts at the table with coffee. The room changed the second we stepped in. I didn't bother with small talk. I told them we needed to set the record straight. My mom immediately said she didn't see the point if I'd already made up my mind to attack her. I told her this wasn't about attacking anyone. It was about ending the half-truths and lies being passed around the family. Then I laid it all out. Easter brunch, the basket my kids made, her pity show comment, us leaving without eating, the text from Jenna about the locked account, the months of financial support I'd been providing while everyone else talked about family without contributing a dime. I said I wasn't going to be treated like an ATM while my children were disrespected. The room was silent. My dad stared at the TV. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. Jenna looked down at her hands. Then something unexpected happened. Jenna spoke. She said she appreciated the help I'd given her after the divorce. She said she never asked Mom to confront me, and that she didn't even know what pity show was supposed to mean until after Easter. She admitted she'd been embarrassed when she found out what happened, but she didn't go further. She didn't challenge the rumors directly. She let that part hang in the air, unfinished. Melissa stepped forward then. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult anyone. She said our kids were not going to grow up hearing that their mother was manipulative or that their father had abandoned his family. She said if my mom wanted a relationship with any of us, it would be based on respect, not control. One of my aunts tried to soften the moment, suggesting maybe Easter had just been a misunderstanding. That was when my mom snapped. She stood up and started shouting that she could say whatever she wanted in her own home, that I'd overreacted, and that if Melissa and I were so sensitive, maybe we should just stay away altogether. Melissa didn't flinch. She said very calmly, "If that's what you want, we can arrange it." For a moment, it looked like that was the end. Then my dad spoke, quietly, awkwardly, like he hadn't planned to. He said maybe my mom had gone too far. He said she should at least apologize to the kids. The way my mom turned on him was instant and vicious. Her voice jumped in volume so fast the aunts both leaned back in their chairs. She accused him of betraying her, of siding against his own wife. He stood up, muttered that this had gone far enough, and walked out of the room. That told me everything. As we left, my mom brushed past me and said I'd regret choosing sides. Jenna followed her, but not before glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Part sympathy, part warning. When we got home that night, Melissa poured herself a glass of water and said something I hadn't wanted to admit yet. "She's not done," she said. "She's going to make this worse." She was right, because 48 hours later, my mom stopped attacking our story and started attacking our lives. 2 days after that Sunday confrontation, the escalation came quietly, which somehow made it worse. It didn't arrive as a screaming voicemail or another cryptic post online. It arrived as a phone call, ordinary on the surface, from a number Melissa recognized instantly. The director of our kids' after-school program. Melissa answered without thinking, putting it on speaker while she folded laundry in the living room, and within seconds we both felt the air change. The director's voice was polite but cautious, the way people sound when they're trying to feel out a situation without accusing anyone outright. She said she'd received some concerns from a concerned relative who wished to remain anonymous. According to the caller, things in our home had become tense and unstable recently, that Melissa was overly controlling, that the kids were being kept from their grandmother for no valid reason, and that the family dynamic had shifted since I had cut off financial support to a relative. The director emphasized that she wasn't accusing us of anything, just passing along information she felt obligated to share. Melissa thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone in silence for several seconds. Then she looked at me and said one word, "Your mom." It wasn't a guess. The details were too precise. Easter, the money, the implication that Melissa was pulling strings behind the scenes. Even the phrasing felt familiar, like lines lifted straight from my mother's private monologues about family loyalty and influence. What chilled me most was the implication. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was someone reaching into our lives in a way that could have real consequences for our kids. I called the program back immediately, calmly explaining that the information they'd been given was false, and that any concerns should be brought directly to us. The director apologized and admitted the caller had mentioned being a grandmother and had said she hoped the children could maintain a relationship with her, despite tensions at home. That line alone was as good as a signature. That night, I called my mom and told her we'd be coming over again. She laughed softly, that clipped, dismissive laugh she uses when she thinks she's still in control. She told me if I was coming to attack her, not to bother. I told her she didn't have a choice. When we arrived the next evening, the house was quiet. No relatives, no buffer, just my parents sitting at the kitchen table. My dad looked tired, older than I remembered. My mom looked composed, almost smug, like she thought this was another round she could talk her way through. I didn't sit down. I told her plainly that I knew she had contacted the kids program and that if she ever interfered in our parenting again, she would never see her grandchildren, not at birthdays, not at holidays, not by accident. Melissa stood beside me and said, going after our parenting wasn't just petty, it was dangerous, and that she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. My mom tried to deflect at first, claiming people talk and you can't control what gets back to you. When I asked her directly if she made the call, she didn't deny it. She just looked away and said she was trying to help. That was when my dad stood up, muttered that this had gone too far, and left the room without another word. I told my mom this was it. I wasn't responsible for Jenna's bills. I wasn't her backup plan, and I wasn't going to pretend she hadn't tried to damage my marriage and reputation. The only reason she hadn't been completely cut off was because my kids deserved to decide for themselves one day whether they wanted a relationship with her. She said nothing as we walked out. The next morning, I got a text from Jenna. I didn't know how bad it was until now. We need to talk. We met at a quiet diner halfway between our houses, neutral ground. She looked exhausted, hands wrapped around a mug like she needed the warmth. She admitted that for months our mom had been pressuring her to get more money from me, telling her it was my duty because I was better off. When I shut down the account, Mom hadn't been furious because Jenna might struggle. She'd been furious because it meant she'd have to either help financially or admit she wouldn't. Jenna told me things weren't good. Rent was tight. Daycare was expensive. Child support was still months behind. She wasn't asking for pity, just honesty. I told her I would help again, but only on my terms. No involvement from our parents, no passing messages, no updates. The moment Mom tried to insert herself, I was out. Jenna agreed without arguing, and for the first time, it felt like the help was actually about my niece, not my mother's control. For a while after that, things were calm. Jenna and I talked more, mostly about the kids. The rumors slowed. My mom's posts online grew quieter. I thought maybe this was how it would be now. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I got another call. This time, it was from my niece's school. She'd been picked up early twice that week by someone not listed as an authorized contact. My stomach dropped before the name was even said. It was my mom. Jenna hadn't given permission. She had no idea. My mom had shown old family photos, dropped my name casually, and told them she was helping, because things were difficult at home. The school tightened their procedures immediately after Jenna went in person, but the damage was done. That night, Jenna called me and said something I never thought I'd hear. You were right. She doesn't help. She controls, and I'm done. 3 weeks later, Melissa and I helped Jenna move 2 towns away, quietly, without announcements or forwarding addresses. Since then, there's been nothing from my parents. No calls, no surprise visits, just the occasional bitter post online that no longer carries the weight it used to. The final twist wasn't my mom pulling one last stunt. It was the one person she thought she'd always control finally walking away too. And that, more than anything else, closed the book for good.